There we go. Meeting is being recorded. Welcome everybody to the Greater Philadelphia Thinking Society. Welcome everybody to 52 Living Ideas. Tonight is Comprehensivist Wednesdays. This is done in conjunction with the Greater Philadelphia Thinking Society. Tonight, our topic is intellectual virtues for comprehensivism. Our plan is to have 2 segments and 2 breakouts, and then a Q&A at the end. So I'll just hand it over to CJ.
Hi, welcome to Comprehensivist Wednesdays, an ongoing series of weekly events designed to foster the art of comprehensivity, that quality of our lives that shapes all we have learned in breadth for context, and all that we have learned in depth for clarity, to form, as Buckminster Fuller put it, adequately macro-comprehensive and micro-incisive considerations to better engage our worlds and its peoples with understanding and effectiveness. As Joe said, the agenda is 2 segments with breakouts after each and a Q&A at the end. So gather your questions as we go. This will be an interactive forum. The intellectual virtues for comprehensive practice. By examining considerations from traditions that have examined intellectual virtues, we may come to better understand the virtues we need to develop our comprehensivity, our ability to comprehend our worlds broadly for context and deeply for clarity by taking seriously Buckminster Fuller's aspiration of wanting to understand all and put everything together. Tonight, we will start by discussing the content of a 10-minute video lecture from Linda Zagzebski's exquisite course on virtue ethics to spur our thinking about the intellectual virtues that might help guide our comprehensive practice, our comprehensive participation in our worlds. The result will give us an opportunity to review all 25 of my previous events on comprehensivity. In our Buckminster Fuller's approach to comprehensive thinking, we start with universe, which he defined as the aggregate of all humanity's consciously apprehended and communicated experience. This source for our learning can be seen as the collective cultural heritage of all humanity through all history. From this vast heritage, we have accumulated many traditions of inquiry and action. These traditions and their accumulated experiences are the sources for all our learning. Comprehensive thinking is any effort to explore this vast inventory of experiences and traditions to address our concerns, intentions, and situations. In the event on the measurements of life, we learned that an interpretation is what to consider and how to consider it. So comprehensive thinking can also be seen as the process of forming interpretive stories, building on our inventory of traditions and experiences. But to be comprehensive thinking aspires to further examine these stories with comprehensive measurement, that is, assessments to form adequately macro-comprehensive and micro-incisive judgments to better engage our worlds and its peoples with understanding and effectiveness. With this context for our exploration, what are intellectual virtues? Our intellectual faculty refers to the regulation and guidance of our mental activities. So the intellectual virtues involve identifying exemplars, models, habits, or disciplines that can serve as guideposts to better organize our mental inquiries and actions. To help us better tune into and identify intellectual virtues, let's consider the content of a short 10-minute video lecture by Linda Zagzebski. I hope you were all able to watch her lecture. It is linked to in the event description and embedded in my essay for tonight's topic, but I will quote and summarize the parts I'm going to speak about, so that if you didn't get to see it, you'll be able to participate. Zagzebski says, the motivation for intellectual virtues is to get the truth about the world for ourselves and others. She adds, we need to believe the truth for almost anything else we want. Now, in an event called the Shifting Perspectives and Representing the Truth, we learned in an exquisite video lecture by Tricia Wong that truth is always multi-perspectival. In fact, Wong went so far as to sternly caution us, don't trust the truth. In that event, I said that the truth can be seen as the coherence of a perspective or hypothesis with the experiences and beliefs that might justify it. And last month, our event on judgment clarified that the justification for truth may now be seen as the process of organizing an adequate set of in-breadth and in-depth considerations or measurements, including ineffable or spiritual ones, to conscientiously evaluate the worth of our lives in our particular situation. With these considerations in mind, I would interpret Zagzebski's use of the language of the truth as a shorthand to refer to effective judgment making in support of effectively engaging our worlds and its peoples. That is, the truth can be seen as our guideposts for knowing that can assist us in making assessments. In that sense, the truth is, as Zagzebski says, a motivation for identifying ways to help us better guide our mental activities with intellectual virtues. Zagzebski highlights several intellectual virtues, including curiosity, inquisitiveness, humility, open-mindedness, perseverance, attentiveness, thoroughness, and carefulness. Her guidepost for assessing all virtues is Aristotle's great moral principle that the good lies at the mean between two extremes. The assumption is that for each proposed intellectual virtue, we can have too much of it or too little, and that virtuous behavior lies somewhere between these extremes. In the event on the whole shebang, we introduced the concept of the adequate as an important way to consider the whole of a situation with our desiderata, that is, all our desires, and intentions as a basis for judging breadth, depth, and value. The adequate has been our way of gesturing to something like the idea of Aristotle's moral principle of the mean. Aristotle's mean suggests that the good is always some intermediate between excess and defect. I prefer the notion of the adequate because it invites us to determine what may be necessary and sufficient for at least this particular inquiry or action, while maintaining the advantages of Aristotle's mean in avoiding harmful behavior, such as analysis paralysis, value paralysis, and the paralysis of the whole. Those are the three dangers of comprehensive thinking that we have discussed multiple times. Broadly speaking, I like Zagzebski's list of intellectual virtues. Curiosity, open-mindedness, and thoroughness entreat us to explore in breadth for context. Perseverance, attentiveness, and carefulness entreat us to explore in depth for clarity with rigor. Inquisitiveness is generally useful for both in-breadth and in-depth exploration. Her list broadly concurs with our approach to comprehensivity, our practice of striving to form broadly and deeply considered comprehensions about our worlds and its peoples. I particularly like the way in which Zagzebski combines intellectual humility and open-mindedness in her observation that, quote, intellectual humility makes us realize that we might be wrong about a lot of things. Open-mindedness makes us look at reasons for and against a belief, end quote. This combination of two virtues comes pretty close to our virtue of mistake mystique, the realization that there will always be inherent gaps in our understandings, our communications, our actions, and our outcomes, which we should identify and strive to reduce. When Zagzebski says, quote, part of being a person is having one's own consciously developed point of view, I think she means that our comprehensivity, as everything we have learned in breadth for context and in depth for clarity, prepares us to make an adequate judgment to measure each particular situation. When Zagzebski adds, anybody who really treats all points of view as equal is not a person, well, we first delight in the wonderful contradiction that the subject of her sentence, anybody, might not be a person. As we explained at the event on ambiguity, contradiction, and paradox, there is often a deep truth behind many contradictions and paradoxes. I interpret Zagzebski here to be pointing out that the very nature of our comprehensivity will incline us to some points of view. Admittedly, the experiences and traditions that we are most familiar with and most esteem will incline us to favor some points of view. She is right about that. But I'm feeling the need to push back a little here. As explorers, it behooves us to treat all points of view as equally valid, so that we might seriously consider them all as we work toward developing an adequate weighing of the relative merits of each. Zagzebski is correct Life is short, and we will not be able to thoroughly examine all possible views. The paralyses I mentioned above that plague our ambition to be comprehensive must be contained. She is also correct that we will need to settle for a judgment of the adequate as we comprehensively measure any particular situation. One advantage I find in the notion of the adequate is its ability to expand, to require more breadth and clarity as we learn more. Learning is an iterative affair, and what was adequate yesterday might not be adequate tomorrow because of all we learn today. We need intellectual virtues that aspire toward more and more breadth and depth as we learn more and more. I felt Zagzebski's way of curtailing open-mindedness failed to impart this crucial value. She is correct that open-mindedness needs some bounds, but I would limit it with the notion of the adequate applied to particular situations, not the intermediate or mean between abstract, unchanging extremes. I hope that's a sufficient introduction to intellectual virtues. Now it is your turn. Let's organize 25-minute breakout, Joe, maybe, on this first segment, intellectual virtues. You know, how should we think about intellectual virtues? What intellectual virtues guide your mental practice? Any issues or questions that you have about this first segment? We'll discuss that in small groups in breakouts for our Q&A at the end. Joe, I'm ready for segment 2. Everything look good?
Everything looks good. Go ahead.
Okay. That was a thought-provoking breakout. I hope yours was too. Linda Zagzebski's exploration of intellectual virtues inspired me to wonder what intellectual virtues might provide effective guideposts for our comprehensive thinking and doing. At the January event on comprehensive exploration, comprehension, and collaboration, I summarized my first 18 events on Comprehensivist Wednesdays with a preliminary proposal for 10 epistemic virtues for comprehensive learning. Sorry, that's my alarm saying the breakout should end. At the, the 10 epistemic virtues for comprehensive learning. These epistemic virtues identify important values that can help us better learn in support of our comprehensivity, our ability to comprehend our worlds broadly and deeply. How can we now identify intellectual virtues for comprehensive practice? Is there a difference between Zagzebski's notion of intellectual virtues and the notion I used in January of epistemic virtues, which I adapted from Lorraine Daston and Peter Gallison's 2007 treatise, Objectivity? Although there may be nuanced differences between intellectual and epistemic virtues, I think the two terms are effectively synonymous. Intellectual evokes ideas of the regulation of mental activities, And epistemic evokes ideas about what qualifies as effective knowledge. But since the whole point of intellectual virtues is to qualify effective knowledge, and since any sentient being seeking effective knowledge will need guidance for regulating their intellects, it seems clear that these are merely two aspects of the same thing. To avoid too much focus on the explorer's own mind, since we humans tend to get quickly self-reflective, if not downright solipsistic, when we look inward, I prefer epistemic virtues because of its emphasis on guidance about what should qualify as good knowledge, rather than a focus on mental activities. In Zagzebski's video on intellectual virtues, she provided, I think, a really good context for us to update our list of epistemic virtues for comprehensive practice. And I'm going to share my current version, which if you saw the essay, you've seen. Here it is. Okay, I'm assuming that looks good. Okay, I now have 16 epistemic virtues for comprehensive practice. There are 9 for comprehensive exploration, 5 for comprehensive comprehension, and 2 for comprehensive collaboration. Coming to better understand the world and its peoples is a primary objective for comprehensive practice. Each of the 9 epistemic virtues for comprehensive exploration identifies a tool to guide us as we are exploring. First, experiences, interpretive stories, and cultural heritage. This is the aspiration to source all our learning from traditions of inquiry and action that organize our experiences, interpretive stories, and cultural heritage. Each individual organizes all their learning into a chronophile, which always includes artifact-enhanced memories, even if dates and times are often omitted. Our inventory of experiences and our realization of its primary role in all our lives is the basic moral principle guiding comprehensive practice. Secondly, adequate breadth, adequate macro-comprehensive. This is the aspiration to engage and accommodate a sufficiently large and diverse collection of experiences, stories, and traditions to adequately contextualize our explorations. The next one, adequate depth, adequate micro-incisive. This is the aspiration to comprehend each subject we explore in as much detail and with as much clarity or rigor as we judge reasonable given our situation. Fourth, induction or empiricism. This is the aspiration to infer hypotheses or proposals for true beliefs from considered experiences, and to evaluate these hypotheses by assessing their coherence with our full inventory of experiences, perhaps supplemented with new voluntary experiences or experiments devised to test them. Then We're up to 5. That's it. My numbers aren't showing up. Adequate wholeness. No. Multiple working hypotheses, multiple perspectives. That's 4, right? Okay. I'm going to give up on the numbering.
That was 5.
Yeah, that was 5, but yeah.
It shows as 5.
We see 5.
Multiple working hypotheses, multiple perspectives. This is the recognition that there are always multiple perspectives from which to consider a subject or situation, and multiple hypotheses that may help us understand it. Therefore, comprehensive inquiry and action aspires to identify and consider an adequate set of perspectives and hypotheses to inform our analytical, synthetic, and integrative imaginations. Next is the adequate wholeness for meaning making. The recognition that the meaning-making process involves the dynamics of Gestalt shifts and Gestalt crystallizations that bring into focus identified complexes of interdefined, resonant relations that form significant wholes. Jan Zwicky highlights this idea as the experience of meaning, as discussed in the September 2021 event, to understand all and put everything together. Then there's mistake mystique, or seeing gaps. This is realizing that there will always be inherent gaps in our understandings, communications, actions, and outcomes. Mistake mystique is the aspiration to identify and further minimize these gaps through iterative, comprehensive exploration and design. Formulating good and sometimes naive questions can help us identify and negotiate these gaps. Ambiguity, contradiction, and paradox. This is the aspiration to lean into and deeply explore the ambiguity, contradictions, and paradoxes we encounter in our explorations, in the hopes of gaining access to the creative wellspring for developing great ideas and truths. The 9th one is comprehensive measurement. This is the aspiration to form a judgment, assessing a subject or situation by integrating an adequate set of particular in-breadth and in-depth measures, where each is evaluated in regard to its effects on the worth of our lives. Non-demonstrative measures, including ineffable measures, should be considered along with demonstrative ones. Now for the epistemic virtues for comprehensive comprehension. If we take seriously Buckminster Fuller's aspiration to understand all and put everything together, after sufficient preliminary exploration, we should aspire to integrate our knowledge into a whole picture comprehension of the way things are. Comprehensive comprehension is the general designation I'm giving for these integrative and consolidating virtues or practices. The first is generalized, well, the first in this set, which is number 10, generalized principles, abstraction. This is the aspiration to find principles or relationships that abstract and accommodate vast subsets of our accumulated inventory of experiences. We learned in the resource to understand all and put everything together that these principles typically manifest as meaningful wholes that need to be carefully tested with our induction, our mistake mystique, and comprehensive measurement. The most powerful principles are often developed through careful explorations of ambiguity, contradictions, and paradoxes in our subject or situation. Thoroughly refined ignorance. This is the aspiration to structure all our learning with a fabric of questions which systematically interrogate the gaps identified by our mystique. That is, we situate all our experiences, perspectives, hypotheses, ideas, and generalized principles in a fabric of thoroughly refined ignorance. The hope here is that this network of questions and ideas will better inform our judgment. Refined ignorance was introduced as the hypostasis of knowledge based on Stuart Firestein's idea that ignorance drives science, and Buckminster Fuller's mystique at the June 2021 event on redressing the crises of ignorance, and it was expanded in several later events. Integrated judgment. This would be the aspiration to better inform our judgment with comprehensive measurement instead of or in addition to a thoroughly refined ignorance, or perhaps based on some yet to be identified approach or approaches. I'm separating out judgment from thoroughly refined ignorance to make explicit judgment making as a form of comprehensive comprehension. Design, evolution, and futures. These are aspirations to navigate the big picture of it all through conceptualities and practices of either design, evolution, or futures. Integrities is a catch-all category. It's the aspiration to integrate all our comprehensive practice into a comprehensively integral whole, into an integrity. Bucky's approach, which he called omni-integrity, was introduced in the event on chronophiles. For the time being, this is a catch-all, so I'm using it as a plural. We need a place for the integrated wisdom of the Bhagavad Gita and the Tao Te Ching, which the 52 Living Ideas group has explored in depth. I see it as the task of those who have been studying these wisdom traditions to scope them and measure them against our ever-evolving set of epistemic virtues for comprehensive practice, and let us know the results. I think these wisdom traditions and all the other universalist traditions offer some way to think of the integrity of it all. Okay, now, for the last two, the epistemic virtues for comprehensive collaboration. We are a predominantly social phenomenon. Our language, most of our ideas, rituals, and technology have all been almost exclusively inherited from others. To be effective and relevant, comprehensive practice must engage this social world by becoming a collaborative enterprise. The first category I had identified in January already, exploration. This is the aspiration to listen to and work with others by sharing our individually articulated experiences, perspectives, hypotheses, ideas, to collaboratively compose new understandings of our worlds and its peoples. And finally, co-designing our lives and the world. This is the aspiration to design our lives, our society, and our civilization through our conscientiously and collaboratively developed comprehensivity. Collaborating for comprehensivity was initially conceived of as a collaborative way of working together to redesign our worlds. While our schema of 16 epistemic virtues may be adequate for guiding and summarizing the tools of comprehensivity I've managed to sketch out so far in this Comprehensivist Wednesdays series, I'm sure it will be revised further as we continue to explore our vast cultural heritage and integrate more traditions of inquiry and action. I think Linda Zagzebski's intellectual virtues are included in our system of 16 virtues, but her list is so basic, so fundamental, that I think they form a cross-cutting substructure that my list builds upon. So, for the second breakout, what do you think of the 16 epistemic virtues, strengths and weaknesses, and questions that maybe we can come back and explore? Joe?
All right. So folks, let's now it's the time for questions. Let's put questions on the table first, and then we will discuss them. So Ella, go ahead.
Okay, I lost the 14 and 15. I've got to find it there in the chat. I know you put it in the chat. Okay, I have it. So to formulate our question, I think it revolves around 15 and 16. And I would say the question is, why we understand that we need to go through the first 14 to build up adequate knowledge, but we feel it's very important the collaborative comprehensive exploration phase and to apply it together by co-designing our lives in the world. And CJ, do you want to elaborate on that as well? Because we discussed this together.
Right. Shrikant, can you put that in a question form?
Sure. So, I mean, the form in which that really was memorable for me is, what is the relationship between collaboration and the exploration? Which one comes first? Which one do you start with, and how do they interact with one another? I'll put it like that. But let's have, I think we have got the moderators from the other two groups wanting to put questions on the table, and then we'll come back to our group. Maritza, go ahead.
So similarly veined along the question just posed in our group, and I'm extrapolating because we were just talking and exploring, so I pulled questions out of what we were stating. And one of the questions is, should the list actually begin with number 16? Should number 16 be number 1 because of the fact that the co-designing should be threaded into all of the other 15 virtues? So that was one of the questions, was, should we consider turning the list on its head so that the exploration and co-design come first? So that was the one that was similar to the previous. I also have a question on where, or I guess the question is on adding curiosity or inquisitiveness into these 16 virtues, and where exactly it is we should place it up in between amongst the 16. And then another question was, what are the foundations upon which these 16 virtues sit? Like, should we assume that there are some basic foundations that are not listed here? And then the last question I have is, among these 16 virtues, perhaps we should explicitly state somewhere a need for malleability or pliability within them. And that's all I have. And if I missed anyone from my group, please chime in, because we didn't explicitly form questions. I just kind of pulled those out from the conversation.
Wonderful, wonderful. So let's go with Joe, and then anybody from any of the three groups want to add anything, please go ahead and do that. Joe.
So there was a little bit of brief discussion about curiosity being a vice in the video. And so maybe how is curiosity a vice outside of the way it's actually stated in the video? And there are like various reasons as to why we thought that was. One question was, what is the difference between moral values and epistemic virtue? And then I'm going to let Trevor actually phrase his one question. The 16 virtues, and it kind of gets to what Maritza and actually Alla had spoken about already. It's missing a starting point. So do you want to, Trevor, do you want to expand on that really quickly?
Yeah, basically it's you should have a starting point for for any given proposition. You should have a starting point that you should be quite strongly stuck on, and that starting point should be it is unknown, which is the opposite of how the mind seems to work. How it starts is with kind of like null, and then when it hears a proposition, the starting point becomes the pre-existing belief that the subconscious mind pushes up into the conscious as true. And it's a very convincing simulation. But of course, it's not actually real. So if you can train your mind to start at the position of it is unknown, and then make it highly reluctant to move to that from that position, like it's very reluctant when someone tries to change it from your belief. It's very reluctant. You should be like that always, except you should start with it as unknown.
Wonderful. Thank you, Trevor. So I'll put it as, what is the proper starting point? So folks, we're going to go ahead and put down all the questions, and then we'll discuss all of them. DLJ, what's your question?
Yes, so from our group as well, we also picked up on what's the end point. So we may have collaborated to come up with decisions. So maybe that's the output that we want to talk about, but then what, right? So from decision to action, and whether that action it would be collaborative or dictatorial. Yeah, so next steps, essentially. So
wonderful.
Here, right?
Wonderful. Thank you. Next up is David. David, what's your question?
Well, I had a few, actually. I think that sort of hit it, which is we're talking about epistemic values, but the title of the overall thing is about comprehensive practice. So if we're focusing on epistemic, knowing, so we're talking about knowing not just for knowing's sake, but knowing for the sake of choosing wisely. What's that for? For the sake of doing. So we're looking for what's worth, the worthiness. So values is the ultimate question. How does all this knowledge relate to the values question? So that's one thing. So are we really talking about the good? I don't think the true is that value. I think something else is really, are these 16 things looking at true or good? I think there's a difference going on. Second thing, and this may relate to the question of where are we starting? What is the groundwork for this? But as we learn more and more, that may not alter certain things. We may be able to keep learning from everyone, everywhere, everything all the time, but there may turn out to be unalterable, fundamental things that are valuable to us that will be of value. So might not there be some absolutes that we want to come down to? I don't feel them coming out. And the third, I have 3 and 4. Third thing is, do we have anything concrete here? Like, Some things come out with a concrete sort of result. Love your neighbor. Treat everyone as your, as though they're of infinite value. Yeah, there's nothing concrete. If it's all about thinking, then that's an inappropriate question, I guess. And last of all, if this is about knowledge or truth, maybe we have to find out what are the criteria for that. And perhaps truth contains contradiction and opposition. So how do we recognize it? What's the bottom line? All right.
Wow. What a series of questions. Wonderful. Thank you, David. Next up, Joe. Joe, what's your questions?
Yeah, just the process by which actually arriving at a generalized principle.
Okay, wonderful. How do you arrive at generalized? Okay, so CJ, we've got some amazing set of questions. So I would just want to talk about the questions. Go ahead.
Jeff, do you want to raise a question about the adequate?
Oh yes, let's do that. Adequate also.
Can I throw one more little? Sure. This might be a real easy one, maybe. When you're looking at number 14, which is about overall integrity in the process, doesn't that mean number 5 and number 12 are the same thing? There are multiple point of views. You must weigh multiple things. So you must integrate that. Isn't that what integrity is? So it subsumes those. So are they really different? Isn't 5 and 12, aren't they the same? 11 and 7, the same thing. Ignorance, if you have to constantly process as pure ignorance, constantly knowing that, then mistakes are essentially what you know you contain already. So are there really these different things? Are they different issues?
Thank you. Thank you, David. So CJ, here is what I was thinking of, and I want to run it by you and would like any comments about this overall strategy. What I want to do is, I think there are lots of really fascinating questions about this list as a whole. And I think those we have to deal with them together, in the beginning, because like, for example, what is the proper starting point, of this? What is the end point of this? What are the foundations of it? Of the 3 elements, the exploration, comprehension, and collaboration, which ones come first, and what is the relationship between them? What kind of a thing is this? How is this related to value? Is this aimed at true? Is it aimed at good? What is the difference between a list of moral virtues and epistemic virtues? So where does this list as a whole fit in? The beginning, the end, the parts, their relationships, its relationship to truth, goodness, morality. So it's kind of placing this list in a context. There a whole bunch of questions is about that, and I think that is a proper. It appears to me that that's a good place to start. What do you think?
I like that. Let's try that.
Okay, so folks, now look at the list as a whole, and you can speak about your thoughts on this. So first question, what is the starting point? Second question, let's just look at the starting point and the ending point first. What are the foundations? What are the starting points of this list? And what should be the starting points? And what are the end points? What is the end of this list? So just let's start with the bookends, beginning and the end. Any thoughts on that? Go ahead and type an exclamation mark if you'd like to share your thoughts. Who would like to start? And I know CJ gets to end at the end. So we'll start with DLJ.
Yeah, I think the start point should be a problem statement.
Okay.
Because you've got to say what we're actually going to be addressing and redesigning or designing from scratch, whichever, right? So we need some sort of statement of the task in hand. Right?
Wonderful. Thank you. Anybody else wants to? Let's just look at the starting point. What's the proper starting point? Or is that a right question? Trevor, what's the proper starting point?
I think that's a decent starting point, but I guess I might add to it kind of consider the context and what is the goal. Because quite often you'll have a nice argument going, like the internet is full of it. That's kind of its purpose. But if you think about it, it's like, what's the goal of everyone arguing? You know, like a decade of arguing and nothing gets accomplished, right? So maybe I don't think people have a goal. Human beings in general don't have a goal, if you think about it. So figure out what your goal is. And then also for the question is it framed optimally, right? So if you have a proposition or a question or something like that, is the way you've worded it perfect, or how close to perfect is it?
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Trevor. Next up is going to be Cheng, Joe, and Ella. Cheng.
Sorry. Yeah, so I think the starting point should be the Tao, what we try to comprehend, what we try to understand, is the Tao, right? The underlying, principle connect everything or create everything. I think that's, and also, I found also that's pretty, what we try to comprehend, there's so many layers, like micro, just almost impossible. It seems in our discussion group, we realize the unknown actually is a natural state. The known actually is very unnatural state, but somehow humans feel more comfortable with known than unknown, even though unknown should be the real state of human being. But we have to create this false sense of knowing so we can feel secure. But it's not real.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Cheng. Next up is Joe, followed by Ella. Joe.
Yeah, I was just thinking along the same lines actually as Trevor as far as goal, but I would say even values. What's the value statement? Like what is your, what are you trying to essentially accomplish? But I mean, this values come before goals. That's the only difference that I see is slightly different from that.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Joe. Next up is Ella, followed by David. Ella. Ella, you need to unmute.
Sorry. I think that starting with a question might be better than starting with a problem statement, because a problem statement might tend to confine the discussion rather than open it up to further inquiry.
Thank you. Next up is David, followed by Judy. David.
Right. It's funny, without knowing what anyone else would say this is, comprehensive, this 16 planks of the platform. To me, it sounds like a personal platform for infinite learning, for opening what I value to transparency, to question, for me to explore even for myself. When you say something and I go, oh, wow, how could somebody say, then immediately I know there's a lot that I can hear that is not something already in my narratives. So I want to hear that story. So even that's the first value, is having stories and bringing stories. So to me, this is a platform for infinite learning personally. As far as the collaboration, I'd like to talk about that too. I think that's taken to a moral, social level.
Well, thank you, David. Next up is Judy.
Okay, I'm going by an experience that I have in teaching adult education and training, where you discuss a lot of theory and then you go into the experience or the application, or vice versa. You can go first about the applications and experiences, and then go back to the theory and collaborate with it and see where the differences are, and then go back to theory. You can go back and forth. But I would start with what's going on. And I think that that would be the foundation. And that would be like number 7, number 8, number 11. And then I would end up with how-tos. Number 16, 15, 13, number 5, etc. That's how I would do it.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Judy. CJ, what do you think is the starting point and what is the end point of the list?
Well, the starting point gets at context, and the objective here was to outline comprehensive thinking, comprehensive exploration, comprehensive doing, and the suggestion is that at least the first 14 are arranged in a pseudo-hierarchical order, where if you're going to proceed comprehensively, either comprehensive doing or comprehensive thinking, or you always start with the universe. What are all of our experiences, all of our stories, all of our cultural heritage? I think that anything else you start with obviously came from our cultural heritage. Even if you invented it yourself, it's a riff, a modification of other experiences, other, we come into this world contextualized with families and mothers and we're all of our education is social. So we, wherever we are in life, we have inventory of experiences. Even if you choose a new one, it is certainly based on some prior experiences. And so I really think experience, the aggregate of all experience, is the starting point. We start with universe. We start with everything we have experienced. And maybe we quickly jump from that to, I haven't eaten in 3 days. Where's there some food? Or whatever your challenge, question, project, ambition. And part of the idea of this list is that this list provides sort of guidance for all the things you would need to consider in some sort of pseudo-hierarchical order for thinking through it. And you might say, well, then the end of it is integrities, and if you're religious thinking, it ends with God or something. And that would be one way to think of integrities, is, we end with God. But maybe we just end with an architectural design. It's a schema. I'm not sure you have to complete it, but it's offered as a way to imagine the full scope, and then you might choose, hey, I'm just trying to design a home with my architect. I don't really need to go all the way to God, and you settle for stopping at 13. That let's leave it there.
Okay, thank you. I just want to say one thing. I mean, what you're saying is actually quite similar to what Judy was saying, or what Jen started saying. That number one, you start with what is, what's the Tao. or what's going on, what is the universe, what is what you're starting out with. And there, basically everything, that includes everything. And that's the starting point. And the end point is, as Judy was saying, it's practical, it's design, it's, what good are you achieving? What is the goal? What is all this work, what does it end up achieving? What is the practical consequence of it? That seems to be what you're saying, just like what Judy was saying and what Zheng was saying. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's great. I like that.
Wonderful, wonderful. Now, so we talked about the beginning, we talked about the end. Now let's look at the three main parts of it and relationships between them: exploration, comprehension, and collaboration. What do you think is the relationship between these three? There are people who put on the table that maybe collaboration should come first, that which is the context in which everything else is taking place. So what are your thoughts about the relationship between these three elements? Go ahead and type exclamation mark if you'd like to share. We're going to start with Mike. Mike, what's your answer? You can talk. I don't know whether you raised your hand about the starting point, the end point, or the three elements.
All of the above.
Go ahead.
I shouldn't have raised my hand. I should have. The paradigm should be explanation point, and that leads into another issue. She used the term justified true beliefs as our starting point. And we know enough to know that we're absolutely right, but we don't know enough to know that we're absolutely wrong on almost everything. And so we end up, how do you navigate a situation where you have exactly that situation, which is most of the time in everything we do, from Newton's mechanics to superstring theory. So what do? We do, the OODA loop says, how do you get to how do you make sense out of Plato's meaningless maps? The maps are meaningless, but they're useful. And how do you use that? Now that leads us into two kinds of knowledge: ontological knowledge versus phenomenological knowledge. And ontological knowledge is driven by thought experiments, and phenomenological knowledge is driven by sense information, which we know is wrong because we sense a very narrow spectrum of what can be sensed. So our challenge is, given that everything we know is wrong, is heuristic, but is useful, how do we filter what I think CJ has and annealed by the rest of the group is trying to figure out a pathway to take knowledge that is wrong in the same sense that Boyd did in his OODA loop thing and make it into something that's useful.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike. Great observation. So I want to just quickly follow up on one point. I really like this point about the loop between kind of knowing about existence and acting, and then taking that feedback loop, the testing loop, in order to keep on modifying it. But the question on the table now is, what is the connection? What are the relationship between the three sets of these virtues? What is the relationship between exploration, comprehension, and collaboration? No. Wait, let other people speak, Mike. I'll come back to you. Go ahead and folks, if you'd like to answer that question. Specifically, people said that collaboration maybe comes first. So what are your thoughts about collaboration coming first? Go ahead and type exclamation mark if you would like to share. We're going to start with Cheng.
I think collaboration has to come first, because if you don't want to collaborate, there's no point even to communicate. You're not trying to convince the other people your view. I think people come together to do something, like to accomplish something. That's why they share their opinion, try to have better comprehensive of the world, and find what's actually the best solution. If they have not that in mind, their whole point is to prove other person wrong. There's no point to do all this. There's no point to do anything anymore. That's my understanding. That's actually exactly what's happening right now. In many situations like political debate, I think that's why we have so many conflicts, because people are not collaborating. They saw the other person with different opinions as enemy, instead of like showing the other side of the coin. Show us what the Tao is.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Zheng. It's really fascinating that, Buckminster Fuller, in his definition of universe, actually includes what work people have done in figuring it out. So he's including that. Next up is Maritza.
So, I kind of go back and forth on this idea. What comes to mind for me is that if one is allying oneself to another person or persons, there is danger in becoming just one person. So the fear here is that if we begin with collaboration, we don't provide enough oxygen and we stifle the flame. In other words, if the exploration does not begin the process, then it's not a strong enough individual to collaborate with others and still maintain its integrity while growing and reforming. So when I look at it that way, I want to reject the idea of collaboration coming first, which it's always a thought. Whenever I get to the end of the 16, I'm like, oh, this one should be first. But then I go back to the beginning and change my mind. And the reason being is that a collaboration is just a fancy word for a group of individuals. And if you have weak, malnourished individuals, you have a weak collaboration. So if the process of exploration fortifies individuals, now these individuals have the strength, the integrity to come together to try to collaborate and comprehend things. My thinking.
Wonderful. It's a fascinating topic. So I'm really looking forward to everybody's thought on this relationship between collaboration and exploration. Next up is Judy, followed by Ella. Judy.
Okay, I think we should start with comprehension, and where we ask, why are we here to comprehend? What are we trying to comprehend? Kind of explore that. And then we should go into exploration of how are we going to explore, and then explore and explore and explore all we want. But at the end, if we don't collaborate to get it done, whatever we have explored and whatever we have comprehended, then we won't get it done, whatever it is. So that's the highest, to me, the highest philosophical approach is that collaboration. It's a very fine area. It's not easy to collaborate. It's really difficult to collaborate. I've tried it in team management and it didn't work. And everybody was super well trained and all that, but collaboration is the most difficult thing in the world. It's almost, it's not 100% difficult, but it's a quality thing. It doesn't have to do with numbers or anything like that. It's really, it's like virtues and goals and love, and it has to do with a lot of things that are not necessarily, that are very ethereal. Collaboration.
Wonderful. Thank you, Judy. Next up is going to be Ella, followed by Joe. Ella, what do you think?
Well, I think that my presumption, which is some people were questioning at this time, that people come to the table having done some of this work on the list prior to collaboration. And so therefore, you know, I just assume that. And because a lot of the groups I go into, people have thought about their ideas. And so if you raise a question, people are going to come to the table with their ideas. Now, there are some groups, for instance, in teaching, there may be groups where they aren't that familiar with the subject. So you teach the subject first, and then you pose a question and put them in groups. And you sort of stack the groups so that you have a strong verbal person and you have someone who is more analytical, and you sort of do it that way. And then you have all these individual groups sort of stacked with individuals with their own expertise, and then they come back together and report to the larger group. But that's just how to do it. But the fact is, you know, if you start with collaboration, a question, and then collaboration, that's not a bad approach at times, depending on the question, because you're going to end up including people who, yes, may have weaker ideas, if you want to use that term. Maybe they're just different ideas, and maybe including different ideas is really important to getting a true sense of what's going on. So those would be my thoughts.
Thank you, Ella. Next up is Joe.
Yeah, it's hard to go against what Judy said. Actually, I firmly believe that it's comprehension, exploration, collaboration. You first have to comprehend something, then you have to decide to go out and explore, and then you collaborate with others. You figure out what fits into the greater whole. So I think that it's a pretty straightforward. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about it, but I think that Judy actually hit it right on the head.
Wonderful. Anybody else wants to chime in before we go to CJ? Sophia, go ahead.
Just a quick note. I think that if people understand what they want and their goals and their frame of reference at first, then the collaboration will be way easier, because they already hopefully are on the same page and they can kind of see each other. And now they are even more open to other views. But if we don't have a comprehension about what we are talking about, it's really, really difficult to bring people to even talk, even if they have similar ideas, but because they don't see it, they are just scattered dots on a page. So I think, yeah, we go with at least some basic comprehension, then a little bit exploration, and collaboration can come later. That's my idea.
Wonderful, thank you. Jeff, what do you think is the order between collaboration, exploration, and comprehension?
So you'll see, I love the conversation, and I love the different vantage points and perspectives. You know, I'm a big believer in questions, and so as you all have been sharing, you can't imagine how much work has gone into to forming just these 4 questions. But I think that it's something like this, what seems to me, and maybe us, may be happening. What do I, and maybe we want, and what do I, why do I, and maybe we want it, and what is my, and maybe our theory for how I, and maybe we might be able to get what I want or what we want and gain the benefit and experience that I and we want from getting it. There's sometimes you get what you want, but the process of getting it destroys the benefits that you hope to gain from getting it. And then how could I, or maybe how could we find out, if possibly my or maybe our theory about how to get it is correct. And so I put it that way to respect both my individual perspective and perception and wants and wishes and theories, as well as how I, with however many other people I might, be on this journey with, including everybody on the planet, possibly on certain issues, or maybe just one other person. How do I respect and take into account the perspective and the wants and wishes and theories and what we might do of others as well? So those are the 4 questions I ended up with. And I think it's useful, at least it's useful for me, when I have an opinion about something, to ask myself, what question is this opinion an answer to? And it's a useful discipline for me. And I find it's actually a very useful discipline for both individuals and teams.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeff. And I like that pairing of saying that all these questions, you're looking at it from your perspective and the perspective of people that you're working with, that are the stakeholders, whether it is just one other person or the world as a whole, but you're looking at it as a pair. That's very interesting. All right. So CJ, what do you think about the relationships between these 3?
Joe and Judy have given me pause on even the category comprehensive comprehension. What I was trying to get at with comprehensive comprehension is the integrative phase. That when you're exploring, when you're learning, at some point you might want to put it all together, come up with the theory of everything. And I have, what I've been doing with comprehensive comprehension is sketching I've led only a few a few events talking about these. I led more on design. Design's important to me. I really think the comprehensive comprehension category is poorly developed at this point, and it's really hard to situate. But in my mind, the objective there was to get to integrated knowledge of some sort, or integrated practice, what is integrated doing? Is that design? Is that just the way things evolve? Is that exploring the future in the hopes you might create it, the one you desire, which might actually be another way of thinking of design? So I would have to say, let's think about the comprehensive comprehension as a mere sketch. For me, the heart of my thinking, the basis of my thinking on comprehensivity are the exploration and the collaboration. Those two, I think, are the basics in my thinking. I don't think you start with a comprehension. I think you start with experience, you know, the universe, our cultural heritage, everything you learned in breadth and in depth growing up. That for me, comprehension is more of put it together. It's got an integrative quality. And a lot of exploration, a lot of design. I keep mixing my categories. I'm gonna leave it with my objective here was to develop exploration and collaboration. I've mainly focused on exploration so far. I need to strengthen the collaboration side, and the integrative side is so big and so complex. I'm not expecting to get that scope for 10 years.
Wow. I mean, this topic is so incredible. Now, I'm very, very confused about it, but I'm going to just speak out my confusion here. So of the three things, I see that we are social beings. We live in a collaborative context, and that's the collaborative context in which we grow up. You know, we grow up with families with hardly any abilities. You know, when we are infants, we grow, we take in this language. All of it is built through collaboration. We're just taking in, drinking in the collaboration of the past as a starting point. That's like mother's milk to us. We grow on it before, you know, doing anything. So I think I see collaboration as the general context in which all of this life is taking place. So that's where I see the collaboration. Secondly, the exploration and comprehension, I think of it as exploration and exploitation, or breathing in and breathing out. Of you're taking things in, you're kind of saying, what is it, what is it, what is it? And then you're saying, so what should I do, so what should I do? And acting. And I see that as a continuous cycle of like breathing in and breathing out. You know, some parts of your life, you may be spending more time breathing in, taking things in, and some parts of time, you know, you're spending more time breathing out or taking action. But that is happening in a collaborative context, implicitly, explicitly, whether you like it or not. When you're using language, you're doing enormous, you're taking in a lot of work, a lot of people have done, and you're working with that. So that's how I see it, that collaboration is the largest context in which everything is taking place. And the exploration and exploitation, or what is it and what should I do, as being this in and out breathing process, which build on one another. So that's how I see the relationship between these. David.
That was inspiring. You directed me, so I think I can say where this was taking me a little bit. I think that collaboration and experience at first are not differentiable. They're not distinct. You come into the world, and this is not just as a baby, you come into anything you're doing, and it is already a culture, a symbol system, a meaningful thing, and it doesn't have that for you. And you are actually collaborating with the creators as you become familiar with it. So your experience is a process of collaboration with people who are not there, the past, with others. And as you become more aware of it, you become more aware of who those others are. And you become able to work with those others. You respect Aristotle, you respect Immanuel Kant, you respect Newton, and you work with them, and they each have personalities and become a set of epistemic values that they each express, and you begin to work with them, and then the people who are doing the same thing, you work with them. So I think these things come in layers. I don't think it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but I think it is the developmental process. Comprehension is what you are, that's your living building in the process. You begin differentiating, you begin seeing the differences between this sort of thinking, that sort of thinking, moral thinking, mechanical thinking, Newtonian thinking, modern thinking. These distinctions and breaking things apart gives you more subtlety, more granularity, more understanding, and you're rule thinking, rule processing your own way, and learning how other things are other rules that you don't know yet. So this expanding process, breathing, living, I like the way you said it. So the others exist for you at many levels and become more differentiated, and you think more about it. It's a comprehensive process.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. CJ, do you want to take any more questions? How are you doing on time?
I'm good on time. If we could maybe do some more. There were some I wanted to get to.
I can think of few things, and then you can put whatever, you can highlight some of the things, and then you can pick whichever ones. There are a couple of questions on curiosity and inquisitiveness, where it fits in. There was a couple of questions on pliability of this list and absolutes within the list. There were some questions on connection between moral virtues and the list of epistemic virtues. So these
I like trying. Can we somehow inquisitiveness, curiosity? Was that pliability?
Yes, pliability.
And absolutes, where and if they fit. Does anyone know? I mean, I have some thoughts.
Okay, wonderful. So folks, the question on the table is, where do curiosity, inquisitiveness, pliability, and absolutes fit in this entire list of 16? How are these four related to this list? Any thoughts? Go ahead and type exclamation mark if you'd like to share. Would like to go first?
You can take a subset, skip one or two.
Yes, you can take, yeah, you can take just one if you want, whatever you want.
Could you ask again? Sorry.
Yes. How is curiosity connected to these 16 virtues? How is inquisitiveness connected? Curiosity or inquisitiveness? It's one part. Second, to what extent is this list pliable? How much pliability is there in this list? Second, the last one is, to what extent are there absolutes in this list? So we'll go with Jeff, followed by Maritza. Jeff.
Well, in the breakout groups, I expressed that I really thought that the 16 are really built on a foundation of curiosity and inquisitiveness, that they assume that. Otherwise, what's the point? What are we doing? And we're trying to make something happen. We're trying to find something out. We're trying to, whatever it is, we are curious. What is interesting to me, and it's kind of the way that I consider those two words together, is that I would love it if somehow we possibly changed the English language to put the word tentative in front of the word conclusions, because what it would do is it would allow us to be explicit about loosely holding our strong opinions, because I think that there's a predisposition in human beings to have strong opinions. There's less of a predisposition to hold them loosely, and all you need to do to find that out is disagree with somebody and see what happens. And because they will defend their strongly held opinion. They will, I guarantee you, seldom will they explore why you have that different opinion and what they might be able to gain from understanding why you have it. That's generally not the first reaction. And so this curiosity and inquisitiveness as a foundation for the 16, I think is both profound and essential.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Jeff. So Maritza, CJ put it very beautifully. Curiosity, inquisitiveness, pliability, absolutes. Where do they fit in this 16 epistemic virtue schema?
So to my mind, those are the percepts to this schema of your 16 virtues. We're looking, if we are building a philosophy here, which is what I view this as being, right? This is a philosophy of comprehensivity. Everyone needs a philosophy in life, and this is the one we're building. So the axiomatic concepts would be those percepts that sit up, that upon which this sits. And I would agree with Jeff that curiosity, inquisitiveness, pliability, those must be the basics. We should treat those as we would treat something like, existence exists. That could be picked apart for days ad nauseum, but in the interest of moving forward, we accept it as an axiomatic statement that existence exists. And so I think that for the purposes here, none of these 16 virtues can be considered if we don't treat all of them as resting upon the very first axiomatic tenets of, having curiosity, being inquisitive, and being open to pliability. Obviously acknowledging the fact that we are human, and, pliability is not going to be a exact universal for everyone. One other that I would add as a foundation for this philosophy would be the a shift in, I know it's actually it's embedded within the virtues, but no, maybe not. Maybe it doesn't need to be spelled out specifically. Maybe that goes in with pliability. I was going to say, like a shifting of perspectives, but I think if we assume a level of pliability, that's covered there. And I think those three are a pretty good foundation for us to start with our 4 axiomatic concepts, or percepts, as it were. Sorry.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Maritza. Next up is Joe, followed by Trevor. Joe.
Yeah, I'll just speak to the pliability aspect of it. And I thought that the point made earlier about how all these are related to one another. So if you look at something like integrity and multiple working hypotheses, they're kind of the same thing in a way. Like you're making the same point. And so I think there's connections in between all of these. So I think their pliability is essentially you can move in between any of these one of these concepts. I think that there's a lot of relationships between all of them, and I bet you could actually come up and maybe get this down to a little bit of a shorter list. Anyway, that's just some thoughts.
Thank you, Joe. Next up is Trevor. Trevor, go ahead.
I was just wondering how realistic it is for each individual to learn all of these things. Like this is a pretty long list, and even one of these items on this list is pretty complicated to do it at a high level. Not to mention, like if you look at a company, like people know accounting or engineering or operations or whatever. So I think like if you're actually serious, you'd probably want to, you know, put people in clusters of like 9 or 12 people and then treat them as nodes. So people of certain particular personality types and skills, you'd assign them certain responsibilities. And then instead of them having to traverse this list of 16 things and try and figure out which one is most appropriate on a real-time basis, just assign 2 or 3 things to someone and they just iterate. And then if you can change your messaging, so it's not like right now it's synchronous. So only one person can talk at a time, but if you added asynchronicity, then you can have multiple pipelines coming into the conversation, text, recorded voice, so on and so forth. Like the way we do it, like if you think of the world before there was spreadsheets, like it would have been, you wouldn't even think of adding up a row of 75,000 numbers. Now we do it without thinking. At some point in the future, I would like to hope this notion that we're going to leave thinking up to individuals is nonsense. Like it's absolutely crazy that this is the way we do it. Yet, is there any sensation that like something is off? Like, do you notice that like before we had spreadsheets, did people walk around thinking, I feel like there's something missing from reality? And then when the spreadsheet came, yes, that's what it was. Were there a lot of people walking around with this weird feeling? I don't think so.
Thank you, Trevor. What I'm going to do is that I'm going to add a question for CJ. So CJ, after you've answered the question about these 4 things, I would like to ask you the question which is implicit in what couple of people have asked, and that is, how do you foresee? I mean, Trevor asked this. I think multiple people asked this. How do you foresee this list being used? What would you recommend? How do people use this list? So first, let's take the the four things: curiosity, inquisitiveness, pliability, and absolutes. Go ahead.
Well, Jeff and Maritza and Joe, well, and everyone has, inquisitiveness, pliability, curiosity are baked in as context and as part of everything here. Absolutes, everyone skipped absolutes. David asked about absolutes, so I got to address absolutes. My position is that there may very well be absolutes in the universe. I just don't see how we can know. And Jeff left, but I really feel that to be comprehensive, we have to give those who like absolutes, want to think in absolutes, are stubbornly pursuing they think it's a keen insight, and Jeff and most of the time I would say, you're being delusional here, please. But no, I stop myself and I say, maybe it's going to take some crazy person with some absolute delusion to get humanity the next phase of evolution. Do we really want to suppress, sanction, moralize those who think they see an absolute just because there's no way to prove it and everyone before you has been proven to be delusional? Now, I think it's violent to say you who have absolutes must get with the relative program. I think we don't know what golden nugget they're going to come up with. Let's be comprehensive, truly comprehensive, and admit that absolutes may be a viable path, even though it sort of speaks against the thrust of everything else here. So let me, yeah. What was the other question?
The other question is that, how do you foresee people using this list?
Well, if you decide you want to become a comprehensivist, or to develop and think about your comprehensivity, the list, especially in the essay form of it, has links to all the past events. It's a way for you to guide yourself through what we've achieved in the past 25 events, and start trying to put together this approach to becoming comprehensive thinkers, comprehensive doers, comprehensive participants in our world. For those of you who would like to, at 52 Living Ideas, at the Thinking Society, develop your comprehensivity. Maybe you've studied the list enough, you've studied these events, you've attended some of the events, you went back through and watched the videos that you were interested in. That this list is a guide for organizing your explorations to build your comprehensivity. What are you trying to do? Why do you want your comprehensivity? It's a guide for people trying to do it. You know, one of my visions is that you would want to organize a series of events exploring your own comprehensivity in your own way. So you might look to the list to see what you're leaving out, and what, you know, other ways of thinking about it. And gosh, your feedback would probably help me realize the errors and mistakes in the list, if there are any. And, you know, at one level, the list is my outline, my emerging outline for a book that's going to try to put it together. But I still feel it's a little shaky at points. I like the first 9. I think the first 9 are really, where is it? Experiences, breadth, depth, induction, starting to process those experiences, the breadth of experiences, the depth of experiences, starting to inductively make meaning out of it, or try to make hypotheses. And if you've got some context. So induction is also when you have your objective, your context, what experience do I need to decide what belief I should have about my question, my objective, my intention, whatever it is. You put it into the hopper with multiple working hypotheses and multiple perspectives. And out of the hopper will come the aha moment, the experience of meaning, as Zagzebski puts it, the adequate wholeness for meaning making. But as Zagzebski pointed out, whenever we have those aha moments, they're often flawed. There's often gaps. There are always gaps. And so we need to question it and explore it with our mystique. And we might discover along the way some ambiguity, contradiction, and paradox. Embrace it, explore it, and develop through all of that integrated a measurement to try to make sense of it. Yeah, we're running late, and I've got some closing remarks.
Please go ahead, CJ.
I forgot my closing remarks.
Go ahead.
Maybe I should move into closing remarks.
Go for it. Go for it.
I wanted to, this was one of the questions on moral virtues and epistemic virtues. And I guess, foresaw that a little bit. And I put in, what are the role of virtues in our comprehensivity? Every tradition of inquiry and action highlights qualities and behaviors which that tradition views as good. The late great philosopher Kenneth Taylor poignantly observes that we are norm-mongering creatures. Monger norms, sell, buy. Norms and virtues may be the most basic human ideas, as Taylor suggests. Our comprehensivity is the quality of our lives that works toward building our lives and our civilization by forming ever more extensive, ever more intensive, and ever more integrated understandings of our worlds and its peoples. To govern or regulate our comprehensivity, we have 16 virtues to help us explore, integrate, and participate in the world comprehensively. It's a good start, but the task is nowhere near being finished. We've barely scratched the surface of available traditions to inform our project. The ideas from other traditions need to be incorporated, and maybe you can help figure that out. It's a big project. We need your help to explore what the possibilities are. Now, for my November 16th event, I'm planning on starting a new series, a sub-series on model thinking. And there will be between 3 and 5, I haven't quite decided yet, 10-minute videos with Scott Page, distinguished professor at the University of Michigan. So there might be as much as 50 minutes of video next month, plus my essay. I can't wait to figure out how I will do all that, because at present I only have the vaguest of ideas. Shrikant, you have other events?
Yes, absolutely. So let me tell you about some exciting new series that are coming up. All right. So we have a series. There is Mark Stallman, who has lectured here, is starting a university. It's an online school where people can take courses, and he is launching it right here in 52 Living Ideas by doing 4 lectures. The first one is going to be this Sunday at 3 p.m. It's going to be 3 p.m. to 4 p.m. It's a short lecture. It's going to be 4 lectures. So it's going to be, the first one is going to be, what are the roots of the current crisis of meaning in today's culture? The second one, the following, is going to be on navigating paradigm shifts. And there's going to be a break of 1. There's going to be no lecture on the Halloween weekend. Weekend after that, November 6th, it's going to be learning how to think anew, using the ideas of the trivium, some of the ideas from orality and literacy, Marshall McLuhan. And the final lecture is going to be on 3 spheres, the differences between East, West, and the digital spheres. So it's a great introduction. There are going to be, I think, 6 or 7 guest lecturers. He's going to be joined, he's going to be lecturing along with Fred, who is the Dean of the Great Books program at University of Chicago. So it's going to be kind of like digital great books plus all of Mark's ideas. It's going to be a quick sampler of what they have to offer. So I strongly recommend it. It's free, of course. So please come. Our Gita meetups have just gotten over. So Thursdays and Fridays have freedom. On Thursdays, we are going back to completing our series on Gospel of John. We're going to be focusing on chapters 13 through 17, which is called the Farewell Discourses. We're going to be using Aquinas commentary on that. So I strongly recommend Aquinas' amazing commentary. I can't imagine how somebody can get so much out of a sentence as Aquinas. So I strongly recommend that just to see the beauty of the language and see how much can be gotten from a sentence. On Fridays, we've got a rotating series. We've got 4 monthly series lined up. The first one is going to be by Evanique, Brian, and Penny, and that is going to be on the divine feminine. It focuses on how, what role goddesses have played in cultures before and why that role has been diminished in the modern Western culture. Next week after that is going to be the series Designing Your Life. It is about self-improvement. That's going to be led by Jang, Joe, and Evanique. The week after that, we are going to do a series on Gita, Bhagavad Gita, that will be discussions on various themes in Gita. And then the first Friday of the month, Joe is going to be doing a series on the book Principles by Ray Dalio. Here in our in-person meetups in New York, we did a series, we went through the entire book, half of the book, which is about principles as applied to individual life. We didn't cover, we're not going to cover the business principles, but we're going to cover the individual life principles. How do you evaluate the principles that you hold? How do you internalize them? What principles do you use? There is a great app on both Android and on iPhone, which I recommend, by Ray Dalio. It's called Principles, which does a summary of it. I think the entire book is there, or the heart of the book is there. So that's what I would start with. So lots of exciting things coming up. So I hope you join us. And I have to say that, CJ's meetups are just incredible. I love today because it's a culmination of so many things, and he will come up with a better culmination as he builds on. He is always working on this, so it's always going to be fun. So thank you, CJ. It's always an honor and just amazing delight to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thanks, Joe, for hosting these Comprehensivist Fridays. Comprehensivist Wednesdays, sorry. All right. Good night, everybody.
Thank you. Good
Bye.
night.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Good night.
Bye.
Thanks.